I want to take you on vacation with me. Close your eyes. You're checking into a resort, not just any resort, the resort. White columns, rolling green hills, and the Allegheny Mountains of West Virginia. The kind of place where 26 American presidents have slept, where kings and diplomats and industrialists played golf and sipped bourbon on white rocking chairs and watched the sun go down over the mountains. The Greenbrier, White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, opened since 1778. One of the most famous luxury resorts in the history of the United States. You check in, you get your room key, you wander down the hallway past the Dorothy Draper wallpaper, past the bold cabbage roses and the bright colors, past the exhibition hall, where trade shows and corporate conferences happen every single week. And you have no idea, absolutely none. You have no idea that the floor you are standing on is held up by concrete walls 5 feet thick and reinforced with steel. You have no idea that 200 feet away behind the door that says, "Danger, high voltage, keep out," there is a blast door that weighs 28 tons. You have no idea that 720 feet under the hillside behind this hotel, buried under 20 feet of dirt, under the golf course, built with the excavated earth, there are 153 rooms, 18 dormitories, a hospital with 2 operating rooms, and a cafeteria that seats 400 people, a pharmacy stocked with prescription medications of every current member of Congress, and a crematorium. Hidden inside what is officially listed as a trash incinerator. Because if Congress was going to be sealed in a mountain for years or months, while America burned in a nuclear war, people were going to die in there, and you cannot have bodies. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not a rumor. This is not speculation. This is documented, declassified, government-confirmed fact. For 30 years, from 1962 to 1992, the United States government maintained a fully operational secret nuclear bunker beneath the most famous luxury resort in America, built to house every single member of Congress while the rest of you burned. And the entire town of White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, population 2,500, looked each other in the eye and agreed to pretend. Welcome to episode 6 of Just Killing Time. I'm your host, Elizabeth Stanton, and today we are going underground. This is Project Greek Island, the secret under the ballroom. If you are listening to Just Killing Time for the first time, this is a true crime conspiracy and stories that keep you up at night. This is a standalone episode. You do not have to have heard any of the previous episodes to follow along today. Though, if you have not listened to the Angel Maker series, go back where you can. It was 4 episodes and it will change the way you think about American history. Today, the Greenbrier Bunker, the most perfectly executed government cover-up in American history, and the Kansas boy from Abilene who set the whole thing in motion. Let's get into it. Before we go underground, though, I want to take you to Kansas, specifically to Abilene, Kansas. Population 6,000, smack in the middle of the state, 170 miles north of Wichita, 2 hours north of Derby, a small town on the flat Kansas plains where a boy named Dwight David Eisenhower grew up in his white clapboard house on Gravel Road. The same Dwight Eisenhower who would become Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in World War II, who would become the 34th President of the United States, who would sign the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, and who would authorize the construction of a secret nuclear bunker under a hotel in West Virginia. All of this started in Abilene, Kansas, and I think the Kansas roots matter more than most people realize. Because the flat grid of those Kansas plains, the section lines, the township roads, and the perfect right angles of a surveyed landscape, it shaped how Eisenhower thought about America, about movement and the relationship between geography and power. time killers from Kansas, from Wichita, from Derby, from anywhere in our state. I want you to pay attention to this section because the roads you drive every single day, the perfectly straight county roads that run on a grid across every mile of Kansas farmland, the highways that connect our cities and our small towns, those roads exist because of decisions made by a man from Abilene. And those decisions were made in the shadow of a nuclear war. The roads you drive to work every morning were built to evacuate cities before a Soviet bomb hit. That is the Kansas connection to what we are about to discuss. If you look at a satellite image of Kansas from above, right now, if you're watching on YouTube, you can listen to the audio, pull up Google Maps and zoom out over Kansas and tell me what you see. It's a grid, a perfect mathematical, almost uncanny grid of roads running north, south, east, and west, 1 mile apart across the entire state. That is not coincidence, and that's not just aesthetics. It is a public land survey system, and it is the foundation of everything Eisenhower would later build. The PLSS ordinance passed in 1785 set up a standardized national survey system. It eventually included all of the United States westward from Ohio to the Pacific Ocean and northward to the Arctic. The PLSS was extended into Kansas by the Act of July 22, 1854, which established the office of a Surveyor General for the territories of Kansas and Nebraska. Thomas Jefferson designed the grid. Congress passed it in 1785. The idea was simple and revolutionary. Divide the entire western United States into perfect 6 mile by 6 mile squares called townships. Divide each township into 36 1-mile sections, sell the sections, settle the land, and build the nation. According to the Kansas Geological Survey, the range lines were set just 6 miles apart both east and west of the 6th principal meridian, and the 6th principal meridian runs north to south through Wichita. That's easy to say. The 6th principal meridian runs through Wichita. The spine of the entire Kansas survey grid runs right through our city. Every section line road, every county road, every highway in Kansas traces back to that meridian line running through Wichita. That's worth a moment, I think. The invisible line that organizes all of Kansas geography and that makes our roads run straight and our fields run square and our towns line up in predictable patterns. That line runs directly through Wichita, through the city where Nancy Shoemaker grew up, through the city where I grew up, through the city where BTK terrorized a generation. The grid is so familiar to us that we stopped seeing it, but it was a deliberate decision made 240 years ago, and it shapes every commute and every trip to the grocery store and every drive we take today. Now, back to young Dwight Eisenhower. It is the summer of 1919. The war is over. He's a 28-year-old lieutenant colonel stationed at Camp Meade, Maryland. He is bored, he is frustrated, and he's looking for adventure. He signs up as an observer for the first Transcontinental Motor Convoy, the United States Army's attempt to drive 81 military vehicles from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, a distance of 3,251 miles, to test whether the military could actually move troops and equipment across the country if it needed to. The answer was barely and catastrophically, very, very slowly. And according to the National Archives of 1919 Transcontinental Motor Convoy, the convoy made its way west via the Lincoln Highway, passing through some 350 towns. Half of the distance traveled was over dirt roads, wheel paths, desert sands, and mountain trails. Eisenhower later said the roads they encountered varied from average to non-existent. In Illinois, the convoy started on dirt roads and practically no more pavement was encountered until reaching California. And that's according to Lieutenant Colonel Dwight D. Eisenhower in his official report to the Chief of the Motor Transport Corps in November 3rd of 1919. They broke and repaired 88 wooden bridges. The convoy sank into the quicksand in Nebraska for more than 7 hours. Trucks collapsed through bridges that could not hold their weight, In the mountain passes of Wyoming, engineers worked around the clock to keep the vehicles moving. After 62 days and 3,251 miles, they arrived in San Francisco, traveling an average of 6 miles per hour, a pace that a healthy person can almost walk. According to the National Archives of the Eisenhower Library exhibit, the experience left a lifelong impression on him. 37 years later, as President of the United States, Eisenhower signed into law the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, funding the national system of interstate and defense highways. 6 miles per hour across the United States with the military's best vehicles on the military's best route. Eisenhower sat in that convoy for 62 days in the dust, the quicksand, and the collapsed bridges, and he filed away something that would not fully surface for 37 years. A country with roads that cannot move an army in peacetime cannot save itself in wartime. He never forgot that, and the roads we drive today are proof. The second thing that shaped Eisenhower's thinking about roads happened in 1944. He was Supreme Commander of the Allied forces. He had drove the German Autobahn for the first time, and the Autobahn, Hitler's highway system built in the 1930s, was something the United States had never seen. Multiple lanes, controlled access, no-grade crossings, smooth concrete at high speeds for hundreds and hundreds of miles. Eisenhower saw that what a properly designed national highway system could do for the movement of troops, equipment, and supplies. He saw it win battles. He saw it move armies, and he remembered the Kansas boy who'd been stuck in the Nebraska quicksand for 7 hours. According to the U.S. Army, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and the birth of the interstate highway system, the IHS is formally known as the Dwight D. Eisenhower National System of Interstate and Defense Highways. His motivations stemmed from 3 events: his assignment as a military observer to the first Transcontinental Motor Convoy, his experiences in World War II, where he observed the efficiencies of the German Autobahn, and the Soviet Union's 1953 detonation of the hydrogen bomb, which instigated a fear that insufficient roads would keep Americans from being able to escape a nuclear disaster. On August 12, 1953, just 7 months into Eisenhower's presidency, the United Nations detonated its first hydrogen bomb. A hydrogen bomb, not an atomic bomb, of hydrogen bombs, significantly larger, significantly more destructive. And now the Soviets had one. And Eisenhower, the man who had been stuck in Nebraska quicksand for 7 hours, the man who had driven the Autobahn while moving an army through occupied Germany, knew exactly what this meant. America's roads were not just inadequate for moving troops, they were inadequate for evacuating cities. If a Soviet hydrogen bomb was heading for Washington, or New York, or Chicago, the existing highway system could not get people out in time. According to the KRCU, National System of Interstate and Defense Highways, the H-bomb's significantly larger blast and fallout, covering several hundred miles, required the coordinated evacuation of all major U.S. cities with rapid cross-country military deployment. These mock nuclear attacks served as a report card in our country's inadequate patchwork of outdated highways, unpaved roads, dangerous tunnels, and narrow bridges failed miserably. Vice President Richard Nixon also expressed concern over the appalling inadequacies of the existing U.S. highway system in July 1954 speech to the Governor's Conference. To honor Eisenhower's home state, the first section in the nation was an 8-mile stretch of Interstate 70 west of Topeka, Kansas, completed in November of 1956. Kansas was first. Of course it was. The first completed section of the interstate highway system, the most ambitious project in public works in American history, was 8 miles of Interstate 70 west of Topeka, Kansas. Eisenhower's home state, paved first. That act that funded it was officially called the National Interstate and Defense Highways Act. Defense. It is right there in the name. These roads were not built primarily for your road trip to Florida. They were built to move armies and to evacuate cities and to give that military a route to reach every corner of the country in a national emergency. The KRCU, Telling History and National System of Interstate and Defense Highways, said 18 million Americans moved to suburbia during the 1950s. Others left cities threatened with nuclear destruction for the safety of what civil defense experts promoted as defense through decentralization. Either way, we're a thoroughly suburban-oriented nation now. Ike's highways kind of did that. Defense through decentralization. That phrase, the suburbs that you drive through every day, the sprawl that surrounds Wichita and Derby and every American city, that was a nuclear war strategy. Spread the population out, make it harder to kill everyone with a single bomb. The interstate highway system built the suburbs, and the suburbs were civil defense policy. The world you live in was shaped by the fear of a Soviet hydrogen bomb. The roads you drive, the neighborhoods you live in, and the way American cities are laid out. All of it traces back to a Kansas boy who got stuck in Nebraska quicksand in 1919 and never forgot it. On June 29, 1956, President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act, the most expensive public works program in American history. $31 billion. 41,000 miles of highway built over 13 years, and simultaneously, quietly, secretly, with a classified budget line buried in the Department of Defense, he was building something else. Something that would not see the daylight for 30 more years. Eisenhower understood something that most presidents before him had not fully grappled with. The highways could evacuate civilians. Mount Weather could shelter the president and the executive branch, but what about Congress? In the American system of government, even in a nuclear war, even in Washington, was a crater, because somebody cratered it. You needed a legislative branch. You needed a Congress to pass emergency laws, to authorize spending, to provide the legal framework for what came next. And Congress had 535 members, not counting staff, hundreds of people who needed to be in the same place at the same time within reach of Washington, able to function as a government. According to the Nuclear Museum of Greenbrier Bunker, in 1955, Dwight D. Eisenhower instructed the Department of Defense to draft emergency plans for Congress in case of a nuclear strike. Even if Washington, D.C. was destroyed, American officials needed a procedure to maintain the continuity of government. As part of these efforts, the Army Corps of Engineers was charged with scouting the location of a nuclear bunker for members of Congress. The Army Corps of Engineers spent months evaluating potential sites. The requirements were specific: within 5 hours of Washington by car, accessible by train and by air, remote enough to survive a direct strike on the Capitol, large enough to house 535 members of Congress plus staff, over 1,100 people total, and most importantly, hidden, completely, perfectly hidden, because a bunker whose location was known was worse than no bunker at all. In 1956, Eisenhower attended a state function at the Greenbrier, a resort he had visited many times. He liked to play golf there. He knew the mountains, he knew the layout, and he knew the resort's history with the government going back to World War II. And that trip was not entirely about golf. According to the electronic nomad, the Greenbrier Nuclear Bunker, during a state function held at the Greenbrier in 1956 with the presidents of Mexico and Canada, Eisenhower undertook an additional secret side mission. He met with the C&O railroad officials and proposed a deal. The U.S. government would pay for the resort to construct a new wing for the hotel if the military could use it as a cover to construct a continuity of government bunker underneath. The secret project was codenamed Greek Island. He was having dinner with the presidents of Mexico and Canada. Official state function, of course, diplomatic pleasantries, and on the side, quietly, over what I imagine was excellent bourbon, he was proposing the most audacious real estate deal in American history. We will pay for your new hotel wing in exchange for hiding a nuclear bunker underneath it. And the Greenbrier said, yes, of course. And then everybody pretended it wasn't happening for 30 years. Construction began officially in 1959. The story was simple. The Greenbrier was adding a new wing, the West Virginia wing, a grand hotel addition with guest rooms, conference facilities, and an exhibition hall. The workers poured concrete, enormous amounts of concrete, the kind of amounts that you need for walls 5 feet thick, for ceilings reinforced with steel, and for a structure designed to survive a nuclear blast 15 to 30 miles away. The Nuclear Museum said this. Construction worker Randy Wickline recalled nobody came out and said it was a bomb shelter, but they weren't building it to keep the rain off them. I mean, a fool would have known. Truman Wright, the manager of the Greenbrier Resort from 1951 to 1974, remembered a contractor asking, "This is an exhibit hall? We've got 110 urinals we just installed. What the hell are you going to exhibit?" Oh, I love that. 110 urinals for an exhibit hall. The contractor asked the right question, and then he went back to work because that is what you did in Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. You kept your mouth shut and you went right back to work. The project used a cut-and-cover style construction method where material known as spoil is removed from the surface. The spoil was used in the expansion of a 9-hole golf course and as fill-in material for a runway extension project at the local municipal airfield. This prevented detection of the project. They hid the excavated dirt in a golf course. They built the 9th hole out of that evidence, guests playing golf on top of the secret. They had no idea that the hill that they were putting toward was built from the excavated earth of a nuclear bunker. On October 16, 1962, just as the world held its breath during the Cuban Missile Crisis, construction was completed. $14 million, 112,244 square feet, buried 172 feet into the hillside. Project Greek Island was open for business. Let me walk you through what it must have been like. You are a United States Senator. It is October of 1962 or some future October that never came. The call has gone out. Missiles, they are in air, and you have 90 minutes. You get to the Greenbrier by whatever means is available, car, train from Washington, or the C&O Railroad. The Greenbrier has its own private station, maybe Air Force transport to the local airfield. You arrive at the hotel. You are ushered past the public areas, past the Dorothy Draper wallpaper, past the exhibition hall, where corporate trade shows happen on ordinary days, and through a door marked "Danger, High Voltage, Keep Out." Then you be corralled with all of your coworkers through a colossal blast door, 15 feet high, 12.25 feet wide, and 19.5 inches thick, into the decontamination showers. In the event of an attack, members of Congress would have been first ushered to the decontamination room, where they would have been stripped, showered, and put on uncontaminated clothes. The decontamination area at the east entrance could handle up to 240 persons per hour. You take off your suit, your dress, everything you are wearing, you hand it to a worker who puts it directly into an incinerator, and it is burnt. You stand in a high-pressure shower, radioactive fallout washed off your skin and hair, and then you're handed army fatigues, Standard issue, one size fits most, and a pair of canvas sneakers. They were taken through that high-pressure shower to prevent any of that radioactive fallout from getting into the bunker, and issued a set of ordinary U.S. Army fatigues and a pair of canvas slippers. A senator from New York, congressman from Texas, the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader, all of them standing in identical Army fatigues and canvas sneakers. Because outside this mountain, the world that they were representing was gone. The suits they had worn to represent their constituents burned in an incinerator, their hierarchy, the seniority, the $1,000 tailoring, irrelevant now. Just fatigues and sneakers and a bunk bed they would share with 59 other people. Bob Conti, the official historian of the Greenbrier Hotel since 1978, said this: "For 30 years, every one of those 1,100 beds was assigned to somebody. For that 30 years, you had to make sure all the filters were changed, all the pharmaceuticals were up to date, and all the food was ready to go. Every single bed for 30 years assigned by name to a specific member of Congress. There were 18 dormitories, each designed to hold 60 people in middle bunk beds. The Senate Majority Leader had a private suite, slightly larger than the dormitory rooms, slightly more private. The Speaker of the House had one too, and the rest of Congress, the 535 members who ran the United States government, would have slept 60 to a room in Army bunk beds. The only exception was the leadership private quarters, because even in a nuclear bunker, even in the ruins of civilization, congressional leadership got slightly better accommodations than everybody else. 60 people to a room, no windows, no natural light, the world above you on fire, and you are a United States senator sleeping in a bunk bed with 59 colleagues, wearing Army fatigues and canvas sneakers, eating in a cafeteria that seats 400 people, completely sealed from the outside world. And I want you to think about how long that would have lasted before it fell apart completely. How long did it last before the political fight started? How long before someone decided the rules did not apply to them? How long before the Senate Majority Leader looked at his private suite and decided he was more equal than the others? I give it a week. The bunker's inhabitants would have eaten in the bunker's cafeteria that seated 400 people, and the cafeteria was at one point decorated with fake windows featuring scenic views. And that's according to the Civil Defense Museum from multiple sources. The cafeteria had fake windows, painted panels showing outdoor scenes, trees, fields, blue sky, because the designers understood something about human psychology. If you're going to keep 1,100 people in a sealed underground bunker for weeks or months, you need to give them something to look at that is not the concrete wall. The food was real. Every 6 months, they had 6 months worth in there. And it was constantly rotated. Fresh deliveries every few days. Older food sent up to the hotel kitchen so nothing was wasted. For 30 years, someone was managing the inventory of a nuclear bunker cafeteria, making sure the soup was not expired, making sure there was enough food for the entire United States Congress to eat for up to 6 months if the world ended on any given day. And according to Today I Found Out, the dustbin of history, Project Greek Island, it had a full hospital suite, complete with 2 operating rooms, an intensive care unit, a 12-bed ward, and a pathological waste incinerator, large enough to serve as a crematorium if the need arose. 35 doctors and nurses would have staffed the hospital if it were ever activated. Pathological waste incinerator. That is the official term. A euphemism for what it really was a crematorium, because people were going to die in this bunker from injuries sustained from getting there, from radiation exposure before decontamination, from the ordinary causes that kill people when you seal 1,100 of them in a mountain for 6 months. And you cannot have bodies. You cannot bury them. You cannot send them home. You cannot have grieving families making noise in the dormitories. So they built a furnace and called it a waste incinerator and put it in the floor plan between the cafeteria and the medical ward. The cafeteria, the crematorium, and not very far between them. I've been thinking about that floor plan since I first read it. Some government architect in 1958 sat down with a blueprint and put those two rooms next to each other. Because in a sealed nuclear bunker, the distance between eating and dying is very, very small. And they knew that, and they planned for it, and they called it a waste incinerator, so nobody had to say the word out loud. The broadcast center had changeable seasonal backdrops to allow it to appear as if the members of Congress were broadcasting from Washington, D.C. A 100-foot radio tower was installed 4.5 miles away for those broadcasts. So 2 panels, spring and summer, fall and winter, seasonal backdrop, so that if you tuned in to watch your senator address the nation in October and the backdrop showed fall foliage, it would look like Washington in autumn, not like a concrete bunker 720 feet under a mountain in West Virginia, not like a government that had fled while the rest of the country died. They built a fake reality studio so that the survivors, whoever was left above ground with a functioning television, could watch their elected representatives speak to them about from what appeared to be the Capitol, and believe that somebody was still in charge, that the government had survived and America was still America. It was not a lie exactly. The government had survived. Congress was still functioning. The law was still operating. It was just that Congress was doing it from behind a painted backdrop, in army fatigues, 300 miles from home in a mountain. There's something deeply, almost philosophically dark about a fake Capitol backdrop in a nuclear bunker, because the government's plan, its actual official documented plan for the end of civilization was we hide. And then we lie about where we are, not because they're cowards, but because they understood that governance requires the appearance of normalcy, that people cannot function without the belief that someone is in charge, and that charge is happening in a recognizable place. The fake backdrops was not vanity, it was policy. It was the government's answer to the question, what do we tell those survivors? And the answer was, we tell them we are still here, even when here is underground and the real here is gone. The power plant occupies 3 levels. The facility contained 42,000 gallons of diesel fuel, enough to keep the shelter's giant diesel generators running for months on end. The bunker also had its own water supply and air filtration systems installed to protect against radiation and chemical agents. The bunker could function completely independently of the outside world. Its own power, its own water, its own air, its own food, its own hospital, its own communications, its own government for about 6 months. After that, the fuel would run out, the food would run out, the air filtration would fail, and 1,100 members of Congress and their staff would have to open those blast doors and walk out to whatever was left. Because nobody ever talked publicly about the plan was for after 6 months, there was no plan. 6 months was all they had, and then you were on your own. Here's the thing about a secret of this magnitude. The bunker itself was the easy part. Pour the concrete, hang the blast doors, stock, cafeteria, done, right? The hard part was the next 30 years, because a bunker that nobody maintains is a bunker full of expired food, failed generators, outdated communications equipment, and corroded water systems. A bunker is only useful if it is ready at the moment. And ready for requires people who are there every day, people who can be seen, people who need a reason to be there. Enter the Forsyth Associates. After its construction, the Greenbrier Bunker was maintained by 12 to 15 permanent government employees who worked undercover as members of an Arlington-based television repair company called Forsyth Associates, who pretended to be doing TV work for the hotel. The company's first manager was John Landis, a former cryptographic expert with the Army Signal Corps. He had a top secret security clearance and was stationed at the Pentagon. A former Pentagon cryptographer running a fake TV repair company staffed by cleared military intelligence operatives, maintaining a nuclear bunker under a luxury hotel's golf course. And here is the genius of it. They actually fixed televisions. Genuinely, the hotel had approximately 1,100 television sets. And the Forsyth employees spent about 20% of their working hours doing real TV repair work for real hotel guests. I think that's kind of an interesting little tidbit right there. Because a TV repairman who never actually fixes televisions is suspicious. A TV repairman who always fixes your TV and occasionally disappears into the basement for hours is just a dedicated employee. According to Dustbin of History of Project Greek Island, to make their cover story believable, the repairmen really did spend as much as 20% of their time repairing TVs at the resort. The rest of the time, they and a few dozen entrusted Greenbrier employees who had been sworn to secrecy were down in the bunker, maintaining equipment, replacing burnt-out light bulbs, changing bed sheets, restocking expired food and other supplies, and cleaning the 110 showers, 187 sinks, 167 toilets, and 74 urinals that were never used. 110 showers, 187 sinks, 167 toilets, 74 urinals, all of which needed to be cleaned regularly for 30 years by government intelligence operatives who told their families they fixed hotel televisions. They also rotated the magazines and books in the lounges to keep their reading material current. They kept the pharmacy stocked with the current prescription medication of all 435 members of the House and the Senate. The pharmacy detail is the one that gets me every single time. Somebody's job for 30 years was to know the prescription medications of every single member of Congress and make sure the bunker pharmacy had them. If a new congressman from Kansas had high blood pressure and needed a beta blocker, somebody updated the pharmacy list. If the Speaker of the House changed his diabetes medication, somebody noted that. And for 30 years, in a secret pharmacy under a golf course, that is either the most absurdly thorough planning I've ever heard of, the most quietly terrifying job description in the history of government work. In 1980, a hotel executive named Ted Kleisner landed a job at the general manager of the Greenbrier. It only took a few days of Kleisner to notice there were some serious discrepancies in the company's books. For example, the resort was spending a fortune on maintenance of equipment that it didn't own. It had ordered thousands of gallons of diesel fuel that it had no need for, and the fuel had disappeared without a trace. Every payday, dozens of paychecks were being mailed out to people whose names did not appear on the employee roster. Thousands of gallons of diesel fuel disappearing without a trace, paychecks going to people who did not officially work there. A hotel bookkeeper's name, and Kleisner, who would later be the man pledging with the Washington Post not to publish the story, understood immediately that something was happening he was not supposed to ask about. So he did not ask. He ran the hotel, he managed his staff, and he looked the other way for 12 years. That is the culture of White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, in a nutshell. You notice things? You ask simple, sensible questions, and then you went back to work because this was the town's secret and the town was proud of it. Project Greek Island was completed on October 16th, 1962. On October 22nd, 1962, 6 days later, President Kennedy addressed the nation and revealed that Soviet nuclear missiles were being installed in Cuba, 90 miles from the coast of Florida. For 13 days, the world held its breath. American bombers loaded with nuclear weapons circled in the air, awaiting orders. Soviet submarines with nuclear-armed torpedoes sat in the Atlantic. Both governments had their fingers on triggers that would end civilization as a functioning concept. The Greenbrier Bunker, brand new, fully stocked, every bed assigned, Every pharmacy bottle filled was right there, ready and waiting. Congress stayed in Washington. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, American bombers loaded with the nuclear weapons circled in the air awaiting orders for more than a week. The world hung on the brink of thermonuclear war. If ever there was a moment for Congress to flee to its secret bunker at the Greenbrier, that was it. But they stayed in Washington, and that's according to Ted Good. Why? Why would they build a bunker for this exact scenario and then not use it when the scenario arrived? Ted Goop, the journalist who eventually exposed the bunker, explained, "It was the most chilling terms I've ever read about nuclear strategy. It was deemed unworkable. You could not evacuate Congress without the Soviets knowing. And if the Soviets knew that the Congress had withdrawn from the capital, they could well have reasoned that the United States might not wait for an attack, but instead launch its own preemptive attack. So the withdrawal of Congress would have been seen as provocation." According to Ted Gupp, and it makes sense when he says that. Right into the bunker would have looked like America was preparing to launch first. Evacuating Congress would have signaled to Moscow that Washington expect to be destroyed imminently, which meant Washington was planning to destroy Moscow first, which meant Moscow had to strike immediately before the American first strike could land. The bunker was not just useless in the moment, it was needed. It was actively dangerous. Using it might have started the nuclear war. It was built to survive. So $14 million, 112,000 square feet of reinforced concrete, 30 years of maintenance by fake TV repairmen, a crematorium, a fake Capitol backdrop, a pharmacy stocked with congressman's medication, and then the moment arrived, the one moment in history when the bunker was completed and the missiles were actually pointed at Washington, they could not use it because using it would have triggered the very thing that they were hiding from. That is either the most profound strategic irony in American history or the most expensive mistake. I cannot really genuinely decide which. The Cuban Missile Crisis ended, though, on October 28, 1962. Both sides stepped back. The world did not end, thankfully. The bunker sat under the Greenbrier, fully staffed, fully stocked, all 1,100 beds assigned, the pharmacy updated, and the magazines rotated for another 30 years. In early 1992, Ted Gupp, an investigative reporter at the Washington Post, received an anonymous tip. Someone told him about a bunker under the Greenbrier. He could not verify who told him. The tipster had never been publicly identified. Someone, somewhere in the web of government contractors, Greenbrier employees, retired military operatives, or cleared officials who knew, decided that 30 years was long enough, and they made a phone call. Gupp began investigating. He researched the Greenbrier, he researched the West Virginia wing, and he noted the discrepancies in the construction timeline. He noted the concrete. He noted the Forsyth Associates, and then he did something that took extraordinary nerve. According to the Washington Post, one of the most memorable moments was Gupp coming in and putting a tape recorder on the hotel manager's desk and saying, "Well, I'm here to talk about what's under the West Virginia wing." He walked into that hotel manager's office and he put his tape recorder on the desk and said, "I'm here to talk about what happened and what is under that West Virginia wing." And the room went very, very quiet. Ted Kleisner, the hotel manager who had been quietly looking the other way for 12 years, immediately contacted his government liaisons. The bunker's existence was suddenly not a secret to the man who had always suspected it. Washington moved quickly. Congressional leadership called the Washington Post directly, and the White House called directly. According to the Federal Highway Administration Civil Defense article, citing the Post, Greenbrier President Ted Kleisner wanted to persuade Gupp not to publish. Congressional Speaker Tom Foley told the Washington Post that if they published, he would have to shut the bunker down. Brent Showcroft, President Bush's national security advisor, appealed directly to Post CEO Katharine Graham not to publish that story. Speaker of the House Tom Foley the National Security Advisor of the President of the United States, both calling the Washington Post directly, asking them not to publish. And Katharine Graham, the woman who was already faced down Nixon over the Pentagon Papers, the woman who had already published the Watergate reporting that had ended that presidency, listened to what they had to say and then said, this is according to Katharine Graham, the publisher of the Washington Post. She said, don't worry, we'll do what we believe is right. Don't worry, we will do what we believe is right. I have been collecting quotes for this show, and that's one of my favorites because it is so perfectly called. She did not argue. She did not lecture them about press freedom. She just said, we will do what we believe is right. And then she hung up and they published. That is what a free press looks like when it is functioning correctly. Someone in power asks you not to tell the truth, and you say, don't worry, and you tell it anyways. On May 31st, 1992, the Washington Post released a story entitled The Ultimate Congressional Hideaway, which reported the secret bunker located at the Greenbrier Hotel. As a result, the government terminated its lease of the bunker in July of 1995. And the headline was The Ultimate Congressional Hideaway on May 31st, 1992. And the moment it appeared on newsstands, the bunker was over. Because a secret bunker whose location is published in the Washington Post is no longer a secret bunker. It's just a bunker. And a bunker whose location is known to every nuclear power in the world is worse than no bunker at all. Within hours of publication, the government began the process of decommissioning. The Forsyth Associate employees were stood down. The food began being cleared out. The pharmacy medications were cataloged and removed. The beds were stripped. The magazines so carefully rotated to keep them current stopped being updated. And the lease was officially terminated in July of 1995, 3 years after publication. Project Greek Island was over. And according to multiple sources on reaction to the 1992 expose, many locals were angry, even furious with Gup and the Post. It was a point of pride to have the secret there, to have that little bit of mystery that no one else in the country knew about. When someone they considered an outsider came in and revealed it, they felt very betrayed. The first people to tour the bunker after it opened to the public in 1995 were Greenbrier employees who received the opportunity as a quiet thank you for their discretion. The entire town was angry at Ted Gup, not at the government building a bunker and hiding it under their town for 30 years, at the reporter who told the truth, because the secret was theirs. They kept it faithfully, and they had looked each other in the eye for 3 decades and agreed not to talk about it. And a Washington Post reporter with a tape recorder came and took that away. And I understand why they were furious, and I can still think, though, Katharine Graham was right as well. Speaker Tip O'Neill of Massachusetts recalled being told that he could not bring his family to the bunker. His response, and I am not making this up, was that he kind of lost interest in it when they told him his wife would not be going with him. Tip O'Neill said he lost interest in surviving a nuclear war when he found out his wife couldn't come. He said that out loud to people who wrote it down, and I find that either the most romantic or the most delusional thing I've ever heard a politician say. But it also tells you everything about the bunker and what was really going to happen. 535 members of Congress, their staff, but no families, no spouses, and no children. The people you voted them into office, they were going to be on their own. You elected us to represent you. In exchange, we will survive without you. There is a genuinely, interestingly, constitutional question that nobody seems to have litigated. The United States government, without any public authorization, without any congressional vote, secretly spent $14 billion of taxpayer money to build a luxury bunker for Congress that would have been used to protect the elected officials while their constituents were dying above ground. Was that constitutional? Was that an appropriate use of public funds? Did the people who funded it, the American taxpayers, have a right to know about it? The government's answer was no. You did not have to have the right to know. National security trumps everything. Even your right to know that about your elected officials having an escape plan did not need to include you. I'm not saying Congress should not have a continuity plan. Of course they should. Some version of this does make sense. What troubles me is the secrecy, not the bunker, not the secrecy about the bunker, because the American people could not have a democratic conversation about whether this was right approach or whether the resources were allocated wisely or whether the families should be included, whether this was even the same government they wanted to run, because they did not know it existed. That same government was asking citizens to build backyard bomb shelters and stock up on canned goods and practice duck and cover drills. The same government had a secret luxury bunker for itself and said nothing. There had been speculation that the U.S. government has built a bunker for Congress since the existence of the Greenbrier Bunker was revealed in 1992. But if there was such a bunker, very few people knew about it. As Bill Arkin of the Washington Post commented, if you're a normal member of Congress, my guess is that you know nothing. A normal member of Congress knows nothing. Somewhere right now, almost certainly, there is another facility, another cover story, another dummy company, another set of prescription medications being maintained in a secret pharmacy, another set of fake TV repairmen who are not actually TV repairmen, in another small town where everybody agrees to be in on the secret. And Ted Gupp is retired. The anonymous tipster who told Ted Gupp about the Greenbrier has never been identified, never come forward, never took credit, just made a phone call, gave a reporter a thread, and disappeared. Somewhere in America right now, maybe more than one, somewhere someone knows where the next bunker is. And I'm deciding whether to make the call. I'm not encouraging espionage. I'm just saying history suggests that secrets this large do not stay secret forever, and the weight of them eventually becomes too much for someone to carry alone, and they make that call. Most of the Greenbrier Bunker is now utilized as a climate-controlled storage for the records of large corporations. The rest is a tourist attraction. The Greenbrier website promises that it can assist with hosting parties in the bunker using James Bond, MASH, or spy themes. You can rent the bunker, the nuclear bunker, for a James Bond-themed party, with catering in a room with the crematorium. That land for just a second. The most classified government facility in American history, the place where Congress was supposed to shelter while civilization ended, is now available for corporate events with a spy theme. And the climate-controlled storage for large corporations now sits where the prescription medications of 535 members of Congress used to be, carefully maintained by Pentagon intelligence operatives pretending to fix televisions. I want to say something that sounds like a joke, but it is not. The transformation of Project Greek Island from that secret nuclear bunker to tourist attraction and corporate storage facility is almost the most honest ending the story could have had, because that is what the Cold War nuclear planning was, a performance, a preparedness that could never actually deliver what it promised, a bunker that could not even be used when it was needed, maintained for 30 years by fake TV repairman, exposed by a reporter with a tape recorder, and converted into a venue for James Bond parties. That's our American history. That is what we built, and now you could take a 90-minute tour for $40. Time Killers. This episode of Time Killer Files question is it's a great one, and I want to hear about it from you. Have you ever visited the Greenbrier Bunker? Have you taken the tour? What was it like standing inside those rooms, standing in the decontamination shower area, or standing in the cafeteria with those fake windows? And as for my Kansas Time Killers specifically, did you know that the first completed section of the interstate highway system was right here in Kansas, 8 miles of I-70 west of Topeka. It was completed November of 56. Have you ever driven it? I know I have many, many, many times. But did you know what it was? That's the thing. That's the question. Did you and your family have any connection to the Cold War highway planning or civil defense programs of the 1950s? And the big one, the one I want everyone to think about. Do you believe there is another bunker right now? Another Project Greek Island? Another small town somewhere in America that has agreed to be in on the secret? And if you know something, if your family has a connection to government facilities or classified infrastructure, you know where to find me. Just send me your time killer file at justkillingtimepodcast@gmail.com. A boy from Kansas, Abilene, Kansas, a flat grid of section line roads stretching to the horizon in every direction. In 1919, Army convoy stuck in the Nebraska quicksand for 7 hours. A German highway system that moved an army through occupied Europe, a Soviet hydrogen bomb detonated in 1953. $14 million, 720 feet of mountain, 28-ton blast doors, a fake TV repair company, a pharmacy stocked with 535 prescriptions, a crematorium that was officially a trash incinerator, a fake Capitol backdrop for broadcasting to whatever was left of America, and a town of 2,500 people in the mountains of West Virginia who looked each other in the eye for 30 years and agreed, we know nothing. We saw nothing. We are just here running this luxury resort. This is our American history, not the history we put in textbooks, the history that is happening in the margins, in the basements, in the mountains, in the small towns that kept the secrets the government needed kept. Project Greek Island was never used. The Soviet missiles, thankfully, never flew. And the blast doors were never sealed, and the congressional members never wore their army fatigues and canvas sneakers. The crematorium stayed cold. And I think in the specific way that most important things in history are the things that did not happen. That is the most important part of this story. The bunker was built for a war that did not come, and the country that built it is still here. Imperfect, complicated, full of secrets, full of contradictions, but still here. I am your host, Elizabeth Stanton. This has been Just Killing Time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for going underground with me today. Take care of yourselves out there and take care of each other.
Alexa, what is a chemtrail?
Chemtrail. Trails left by aircraft are actually chemical or biological agents deliberately sprayed at high altitudes for a purpose undisclosed to the general public in clandestine programs directed by government officials.